Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next event of Empower Africa. My name is Shai Bernstein. I'm head of business development at Empower Africa, and I'm honored to have everybody here on our event on how to hire and build a successful agribusiness team in Africa. In a moment, I'm going to present our moderator, and she'll present, of course, the rest of our esteemed speakers here. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Empower Africa is a business community with a mission to drive investment, trade, and job creation in Africa. We believe that business is the best way to create sustainable and scalable solutions. And while doing so, of course, a pivotal player here in terms of job creation and somebody who can liaison and help connect the different people is, of course, Inez from JobNet Africa. Inez is the managing partner of JobNet Africa, and I'll let her present, of course, and share more about the company because they're doing tremendous things. But as we all know, there's so much potential in Africa. And we know that it's 54 countries, right? And not one country, as many people as to look at it, a continent with 54 countries. And each country is in a completely different stage. We know that there are different needs, different projects that are in potential there. And there are many multinational enterprises that are very interested and very keen on doing business in Africa or are already present in Africa and have business in Africa. But still, it's of course challenging in any new market, an emerging market specifically, to find, good people. I could say this also just, from being in the Israeli tech ecosystem for the past 10 years, that even in, San Francisco, New York, Tel Aviv, London, you name it, finding the team members and the good team members is really, really one of the most important things in any business. And it's not an easy thing, I think, as we all know. So, of course, doing business in Africa has its own unique challenges, and we're going to hear a lot about that today. The other thing I just want to mention is, of course, the Empower Africa business community. If you guys aren't yet members, I welcome you to come join us. We just passed the 8,000 member today, and we're growing every day. So I'm going to put a link in the chat over here, so anybody can just press the link and join the business network if you'd like. Stay tuned also to our different events. We have the Empower Africa Tech Summit, which I'll actually put in a link here as well. We have as a keynote speaker the managing director of Google in charge of all sub-Saharan Africa. And then we have an investors panel and a African unicorn panel as well. So we have SoftBank, Microsoft, Total Ventures, and then we have Andela, Flutterwave, and Jumia. It's going to be very exciting. So that's December 9th, and I'll put here the information so everyone can see as well. But of course, you can look at our website and so on. So without further ado, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Inez Willeboordse. Inez, please join us and let me know if I pronounced the name. Did I pronounce the name properly?
Almost, yes. But even I struggle still. But it's Willeboordse.
Willeboordse. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so me and Inez have known each other for quite a while now. We've actually also been using her services to some extent in terms of us wanting to find, good people across the continent, of course. And I really think, Inez, that what you guys are tackling and doing is not only a valid, business opportunity, of course, but has so much more significance that I think we all, can agree on. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for moderating this panel. I'm going to pass the baton on to you, okay? So you can present the rest of the speakers.
Yes.
And that's it. Again, I'm going to put here in the chat. Oh, one last thing. If you look, everyone, on the right side of the screen, you'll see it says chat participants and Q&A. So you can chat people from the general chat and personal chat, but there's a Q&A tab. So throughout the panel discussion that all the speakers are going to be speaking about, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them on the Q&A tab. And after the panel discussion is over, there'll be some time for Q&A, and Inez and the speakers will see if they can address it. Okay, that's it. Inez, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Shai. Thanks so much for your introduction and for having me. It's quite an honor. We do so many interviews and we're on video every day, all day, but this is also quite a new one because it's live. So quite exciting. And it's also quite an honor to have the panel on board because I invited them and they were actually happy to join. So that is fantastic as well. I would like them to ask them to introduce themselves briefly, who they are, what their companies are, but I'm going to jump the queue quickly because I just want to introduce myself first for a little bit. So everybody has the right context of who we're talking to, me and the panel, and then what questions we will be discussing with them. So as you know, my name is Inez Willeboordse, because you just told them. I'm the founder and managing partner of JobNet Africa. And JobNet Africa helps businesses in Africa gain profit and time by sending them the top 5% professionals in the market, not just on the market. And what that means is that we're basically an executive search agency, or not such a nice word, headhunters. And our niche is Africa, so we deal with a lot of companies all over Africa. We have a team of 6. So quite boutique still, but everybody in the team actually works or lives or has lived on the continent. So they're all Africa passionists, and we try to know as much about the continent as we can. Obviously, it's huge. It's 54 countries. So, but we try at least. JobNet Africa exists 10 years this year, so we're celebrating. And yeah, it's been quite a journey and a lot of fun as well. What I would like to do is to quickly go to the panel and have them introduce themselves. We have 3 senior managers from different countries, in different countries. Yeah, please, maybe Henry wants to go first to introduce himself. Tell us something about yourself and the company you work for. Hi,
Can
Henry.
you hear me and see me? Hi.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm the CEO of Benzica Poultry International
Limited.
Hailing from the country of
Uganda,
Uganda.
the Pearl of Africa. Not sure how many of you have been here, but it's a lovely country, lovely climate. You can stay here forever. So, first of all, then I'll talk about the company. So, I obviously am a practitioner in the agribusiness sector. I started my career
From Zambia. Hierarchy, and got to the position of finance director. Then, obviously, 8 months
with a share, came knocking on
Uganda, with a very strong growth opportunity in the poultry sector in the country, which was quite attractive. So I came here for modules of the value chain, and we have leadership positions in all those modules. Okay, so actually,
within Uganda, we within the Kenya, we've got roughly 15 to 20% of the day-old chicken business already. In
business,
in the animal feed business and
in the process
business here. So you can see we're fully processed. We've got broiler sites across Kampala. We've got processing sites such as our hatcheries. We've got 2 major hatcheries. We've got quite a significant in an area called Mukono, and we've got a very strong distribution across the entire country. 43 agri shops and 23 Pearl Chicken, which is the processed meat, processed chicken shops within Kampala. So very aggressive growth cycle that we're going through. So yeah, happy to be in Africa and grow this business here.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks. Your connection is a little bit on and off, but I think we got the story.
Okay.
And I can actually confirm it's quite a beautiful company also to visit, because I was visiting there a couple of years ago at one of the mills. So thanks, Henry, for that. Ben, I don't know if you would like to take the floor and introduce yourself and the company that you work for.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Ben Hampson. I'm English, but I live and work in Sudan. Except not right now, actually. My wife is due to give birth, so we've nipped back to London for that. So I'm in London now, but I live and work in Khartoum in Sudan. And I work for a company called DAL Group. DAL Group has been involved in the agriculture sector since the 1950s. And is now the biggest company, not just agri company, but in Sudan. And we've evolved into a very big conglomerate. Our history begins because we used to import tractors and tractor parts, which we gave to farmers. And over the years and generations, it's a family-owned business, we have expanded from tractors to fertilizer to working directly with farmers to owning our own farms, particularly arable and now dairy. And then, like Henry, we have moved further down the value chain, and we now actually the bulk food. So we are the biggest wheat miller in the country with its byproduct of animal feed, and then we produce pasta on the back of that. As I mentioned, we have a dairy farm, and we are pretty much the sole packaged dairy producer in the country. But we also have an extended business, which really isn't to do with farming, in beverages, which is primarily water business, and we are the Coca-Cola bottler. So a big sort of sprawling conglomerate. My role is a strategy role. My role is to sort of design and implement big change across the organization. And sometimes that involves quite a lot of recruitment. So I've known Inez for a year or so now, and I Africa a very useful and great agency to, and hence I'm here now. So thank you for having me, Inez.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that, Ben. That's very kind. Fredrick, maybe you would like to tell us something about who you are and what you do and who you work for.
Thank you very much, Inez. So my name is Fred Otieno, or Fredrick, if you like, and I am the Managing Director at Syngenta East Africa. We've interacted with Inez a couple of times, and really great to be invited, and a good evening and good morning, depending on where you are from. So a little bit about myself. I have been the leader of this business in East Africa for the last 3 years. My background is in business and marketing, having worked for other organizations in fast-moving consumer goods over the past sort of 20 years. I'm currently working as a business leader for Syngenta East Africa. So for those who may not know Syngenta, we are one of the world's leading agro companies, and we literally help farmers be able to produce their food sustainably and more efficiently through the use of appropriate technologies. These technologies basically are from seed technologies to chemical technologies and biological technologies. And at the end of the day, you know, the way I view my role is we're helping to feed the world. I think we're in an environment where food is going to be increasingly important. We've seen some of the food chains affected by COVID, for example. And, you know, as we continue growing our populations, our farmers get a lot of pressure in terms of how they can be able to sustainably deliver food, high quality food to the populations, and eventually some of what eventually goes to Ben and other people in the chain. And therefore, this is what my role is, to really help farmers across this region to be able to use technology to be able to produce their foods more efficiently and sustainably. So it's a big company. It cuts across a lot of countries, more than 100 countries in the world, headquartered in Switzerland. But in this region, we are present in Kenya. I'm Kenyan. I sit in Kenya, covering the region, which is Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan.
Okay, thanks, Fred. And well, so thanks for the introduction. I just wanted to ask the question straight away. But what I wanted to introduce, so we're going to go through some questions. And what I want to avoid and also to tell the public is that we're not going to do like slides and presentations. We now know who's on the panel, and we're just going to do some informal discussions about senior recruitment in Africa, basically. So, Fred, if I can stick with you, I should say, sorry. How are you involved in management, in senior management within the region? What is your role within that?
Yeah, so my role is to lead the business strategy for Syngenta in this region and to be able to grow the business opportunities for this organization while, giving appropriate solutions to farmers. So effectively, I like what Colin Powell says, that leadership is all about people. And I really consider that any senior leader in any organization, one of the most important resources that we have to allocate and employ to be able to deliver the outcomes for the business is people. And people is the biggest and I would say most important factor of production in any organization. So for my business, we work very closely with farmers to be able to look at the solutions they need for their crops. Crops vary by climatic conditions, they vary by soil conditions, they vary by locations. And all these farmers need solutions to be able to get their farming profitably. Hence, I have to work with people to ensure that we are delivering the right solutions to the groups of farmers in ways that are connecting to their current conditions and challenges.
Okay. Okay. And Ben, maybe I can ask you, I don't know if Henry can get back on because he kind of left, but I think he can come back so we can just keep chatting. But Ben, in what sense, or how is the recruitment within DAL Group set up, I should say, for senior management? Who drives it? Is it the management or is it HR more?
Well, I mean, the sort of recruitment of senior roles has to start with the strategy of the business. What are we trying to achieve, obviously? And really that obviously sits within, very much the business, and in our case, because we're family-owned business, the owners. I think, from strategy, if we want to do things that are new or a change, we then need to think about how our organization evolves in order to be able to do that stuff. And that might mean adding roles or changing things. So in that sense, it's very much led by the business. I mean, HR is a really important partner in the process because, rightly, they are responsible for kind of rules and guidelines and processes and knowledge on how these things should be done. But really, it's led by the business for senior management. Interestingly, for sort of more junior management, I mean, as an example, just the food side of the business, the agri-food side of the business, we employ about 7,000 people, most of whom are line operators or farm workers or, truck drivers and things like that. At that level, that's very much organized by HR because, we need a driver because we have 300 trucks or whatever it is. And simply, that's a process kind of thing. But the senior stuff is led by the business.
So it's usually, are you saying it's initiated by the business because there's a gap or there's an expansion or there's a new strategy, and then HR takes it on with the processes that are in place? So it's a cooperation.
Yeah. I mean, we have to. I think it works best as a cooperation, right? The business knows what it needs, and HR knows how to hire. So I think it's a nice cooperation. Yeah.
Okay.
And also maybe to add a little bit, Inez, on my side, and very similar to Ben, the business strategy drives the people you bring into the business. But we also do use different recruitment agencies to help support getting the right caliber of people, being able to cast the net widely based on what we're looking for. So I'd say it's a combined partnership between the business that describes what do we want for the next step, HR providing consistency of process and procedures to ensure that we're doing everything in the right way, in the right standard, and any external agency to ensure that we are getting the right caliber sorted out at a very independent level to be able to know what's available in the market.
Okay, I think that's actually a good point where a recruiter is then a third party that can scan the market and come up with those candidates that suit those roles. Okay, fantastic, thanks. And maybe Henry, can I ask you, what are the typical struggles you encounter when looking for senior management in your company?
First of all, I sort of lost Ben and Fred at a point.
No, you're good now. Okay. You're good now.
All right, thanks. Look, it's the industry, especially in Uganda, a very difficult market in terms of the recruitment of the key resources. I think Inez now understands where I'm coming from. I think I've used Inez twice now. We did a very good recruit of a director, and we were looking most recently we're very picky in terms of the quality we're looking for. What you're trying to look for is ideally plug and play, where someone can come from a similar industry, sit in without much ado and get with the strategic vision of the organization. But you see, that's on paper, but you don't get that. Is allow for a developmental period where the guy can hit the ground running. That does take some time, and poultry is a very complex business. From sugar, think is into poultry, but as I can explain now, it's not that easy. You've got, well, Ben, you've got a complex business, more feed, which different cost structure. You got KO chicks, with mortalities, a different cost structure. You got the processed meat. Now that's a serious processing unit on the abattoir side. Then you can have also value-added products like chicken sausages, patties, frankfurters, what they call it. I mean, that's what we're venturing into. Now you can imagine to get the right skills to bring into your organization to handle that is very difficult. So what we do, but in Uganda, there's no skills like that. So a lot of the guys we brought in from South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah. We brought an experienced guy for the abattoir from. This guy is excellent, and his job is to impart the knowledge to the local guys. Okay. We've also got, in fact, we've got 3 South Africans, all breeder and broiler. I mean, they do a lot of the big organizations like Quantum Rainbow in South Africa. We've got one on the where you can sort of get the right resources is perhaps on the finance side. We sort of go for the local teams here because those are more easier.
More generic.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
so
is that
very,
because,
very difficult, Inez.
Yeah, I know. Now, is that why, for instance, for a finance role or a sales role, you can kind of copy paste it to other industries? But obviously, when you need that technical poultry person or a dairy person in Ben's case, or a vegetable seed or whatnot, then you have to sometimes look abroad. And would that be in any country, or, you know, from what I've heard, Fred, maybe you can tap into that. What is the talent pool you think? What makes you decide to look for people locally, or you go internationally?
Yeah, I mean, for my side, I think one of the things we've done is, depending on the environment and the quality of people available, then it creates a different dynamic. So, for instance, I had a chance to work and live in Uganda at some point, and in some way, I recognize what Henry is mentioning. Within East Africa, you know, I think Kenya has a bit of fortune in the sense that there are lots of international organizations that do a lot of work in these areas, particularly in agriculture, and therefore you find quite a good skill set that exists within the market in these areas. Hence, you know, even for qualified or specialist areas like breeding, when you're talking about seed development, you still find quite a number of people who are fairly good. And therefore, you know, the big question around, do you hire externally or internally, is really driven by, is the capability you're looking for uniquely different to fit the strategy of the future that you cannot easily find within the market? I think that for me would be the major issue. But at the end of the day, when I look at opportunities for recruitment, I always remember that, you know, we have to recruit for attitude as well, because even when you have capabilities that are unique, there are always opportunities to be able to upskill people with the right attitude and skill sets. And therefore, eventually, it's about bridging how much the market is available to train in a certain direction, and also that manages inflation, because eventually, if you have a very unique kind of skill set that's required, eventually it causes a sense of inflation depending on how competitive the market is for that unique skill set that may not be available.
It's true. Very insightful. Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, Yes. I mean, I agree with both points. I think we're more in Henry's camp of operating in a market where we have a limited talent pool, unfortunately, with all the issues of brain drain, etc. Would like to hire locally for 100 reasons. You know, it's the right thing to do, and cost perspective, all sorts of reasons. And that is our first port of call. But similar to the guys were describing, where there are specific roles. So, for example, we were hiring sustainability just recently. Sustainability is an area where, you know, global, you know, agri-food businesses have moved on and created, you know, ESG agendas in a way that hasn't happened in Sudan. And therefore, to bring in those skills and teach people, we need to hire internationally. But at the same time, we don't want to keep doing that. So we're doing, and it sounds like you guys are doing a similar thing, which is, okay, well, you know, we're a big business. We can afford to invest in people, particularly younger people. So we have a graduate recruitment scheme. And also the function. So finance, for example, we've basically stolen a model from a previous finance director who used to work at Diageo. And brought that in and implemented it within the business, because we really do want to hire locally, and we hire for attitude, as you say, but level.
The only reason why you're looking outside, as Fred said, you can't find the knowledge in the country. We sometimes have to go outside.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's not about, and it is about attitude and all that, but sometimes the attitude is there, but people in the country just haven't had the opportunity to gain the knowledge. So, and in that sense, you know, Kenya is a little bit ahead, I also feel, because when we get requests to recruit for maybe Uganda or Sudan, and the request becomes regional, we're often asked, obviously, to look for Kenyans because the skill set and the pool of talents is a little bit higher and bigger. Okay, fantastic, thanks. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Hofstra Theory. It's a cultural theory that builds up culture out of 6 pillars. And you guys all deal with multicultural and multinational teams. And what it says actually is that if you manage a multicultural team well, it actually gives you much more than a unicultural team. But if it's managed poorly, it will actually really work against you. Is that what you guys also experience, or maybe you can tell us something about the takeaways from multicultural teams? Fred, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think when I was listening to Ben and Henry, there are probably certain inherent benefits when you have a global organization as well, in comparison to one that's a bit localized, because I guess from their previous experience, they would also know that when you're dealing with a global organization, there's real opportunities of borrowing different perspectives and styles, even if you don't necessarily recruit globally. And it's a very interesting question, because I did a study myself in my earlier days, trying to think about what's the impact of culture and different cultures within an environment. Absolutely. In this day and age, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we know that multicultural experiences drive accelerated outcomes for the business. Hence, being able to bring in people with different ideas, different thoughts, different histories is extremely important to ensure that we are driving the business forward. The pace of change in this time and age is like no other. Hence, you cannot depend on the same old histories to be able to create success in the future. And therefore, I really agree that creating a multicultural experience is great. When you have an organization like ours, where we can feed in also opportunities to shape the culture externally, it helps as well to ensure that we achieve that. But then lastly, I would probably mention that in my perspective, strong organizational cultures then transcend, what you call national cultural biases. I guess when you look at, the Coca-Colas, the big companies of this world, what they tell us is that they can operate in different cultures with different people and still be able to create a unified sense of value and purpose that is consistent across. So, what does that say to me? It's great and important to have cultural diversity. If it's handled poorly, it can be extremely detrimental. But when it's unified with a common purpose and common value, you're able to really create, faster value for the organization.
And to build on that, because it's like a basic culture that everybody taps into. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. At the end of the day, the corporate culture, is set so that it can create a unified sense of belonging. It's like, coming into the family. So, I suppose in Ben's example, that the culture is set by the family. In my situation, the culture is set by, the corporate culture that we ascribe to. And therefore, when somebody comes in, they will be either fitting in based on the corporate culture that we are setting up, as opposed to their individual cultural framework from where they come from.
And Fred, I imagine you find, and we spend more time when recruiting people externally, questioning and thinking about how people fit in culturally and whether their values actually match, than can they do the job, right? And that is unbelievably important, because we've all seen international expatriates fail, if we're talking about internationals, and it's usually because of some misfit of culture or whatever. And they can fail quite spectacularly. So spending time on that is super important, in my opinion.
It's a good point, Ben. I think that's also part of the onboarding and that. Yeah, Henry?
Yeah, so Ben, I totally agree. Cultural diversity, but I can tell you, depends where you're recruiting from. I know Inez spends time in 2 countries. Give an example in Zambia. One of the countries you spend time in, I remember they all came into Zambia, and let me tell you, they had a very brash attitude. That was their culture. That's their behavior. Unfortunately, the locals did not take well. They couldn't get synergies. It couldn't work. So at the end of the day, you have to try and harmonize with a single company culture. Okay. The Coca-Colas, the SAB Millers. these guys are world class. Wherever you go in the world, they all subscribe to. Wherever you find them, they all talk the same values, the same thinking. That's the difficulty that I'm having. So I'm trying to a culture set around a value system, so that everyone can think the same. I call them ambassadors. If you meet this guy in the office, if you meet him outside the office, instead of backbiting your company, the guy is selling your company. He's an ambassador of your company, and it's a very difficult process to get through, I can tell you. And you have to be very patient, be very determined to get that through. SAB Miller is world class on CI for business improvement. I think they're levels ahead other companies, and little babies compared to these organizations. But let me tell you, I've sat with a lot of the guys who work there, and they've been through a lot to get to a unified, which is consistent the globe. So I'm a fan of cultural diversity, but it does have its to me. I find a guy, maybe if I'm giving the wrong impression, maybe shouting at him, that's how he gets the job done. But unfortunately, you might go into a country where the guy takes that very sensitively. So you just can't go from one culture to the next and just impose. Nothing is different. You need to adapt, subscribe to those values, and just change the way you behave, unfortunately. Okay.
True that. And I think that's also part of the difficulty of the recruiting, I'm guessing, or well, that's what we experience, is that you're not just looking to match your CV, you're looking definitely also somebody that matches the company culture, but also the country where they'll be staying, if you look at international candidates. So, and it's a big cost and a big risk, especially if people come from overseas. So that's tough. Okay, and so for some of you, maybe headquarters in, not for Ben, I guess, but in another country, maybe for Fred, does headquarters, are they involved in any of the recruitment decisions, or does everything stay with the local team?
I guess it depends on the seniority of the role. I think the example that Ben gave is quite appropriate in this regard. So when you're looking at, farmhands or people who are doing a much lower kind of role, which is not necessarily strategic, but more operational, it is more an in-country decision. When you're looking at significant strategy-related roles, where it's about either shaping the strategy within the country or within the location, or alternatively, driving a new strategic agenda for the organization, because obviously organizations evolve, and there could be new directions where the global organization wants a new type of skill set to be employed. Then it becomes an imperative for us to then think about what kind of skills do we need to leverage. Let me give an example. You find within agriculture right now, we are coming into a space where there's an inflection between traditional agriculture and technology. And you can see more and more the impact of technology, even for small scale farmers. Now, there are certain technological aspects, for example, application of different chemical solutions that will require, very specialized knowledge. Now, for us to recruit such a person, then you have probably HQ involved, or things like breeding. So if you're talking about specific, seed development and breeding quality, R&D related, activities, then you find the HQ could then, probably be involved in evaluating, understanding the skill set, because we may not have the right standard to evaluate locally because it's a new skill.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. And maybe my last question to all of you, how do you think recruitment could be improved? And not necessarily within your company, but in general. So for senior management level in Africa, which is a big understanding, how do you think recruitment could be improved? It's quite a tough question, maybe. What we seem to see a lot is that recruitment is always around time, team, and money. So there's either no time because somebody left, or there's no time to do the recruitment, it's too expensive, or the recruitment might be too expensive, or there's a problem within the team which is not aligned. So those are usually the three bigger problems. But how do you guys see improvements? I don't know, Henry wants to, or somebody that has an answer.
I can. From my perspective, we've had chat before, I wish there was a large talent pool that we could draw from in Africa. But I mean, look, that's up to you really to be able to tap into the different industries. You must have the ability, if I'm looking in Uganda, to be able to have a certain talent from which you can dip in and provide me with a resource. I mean, that will really speed up the time and the money as well in terms of recruiting the right person. I mean, for me, I'm a big fan of a localization. I mean, I would prefer to get the, but where I can't, yes, then you go cross, which is something you do for us quite easily. But remember the hassles in bringing in someone as an expat. I mean, permit issues, bringing
family is actually usually the biggest one. Yeah,
I know. Yeah. Correct. I mean, I had that problem when coming to Uganda. I've got a small family, so not a big problem. Yeah. So I think for me, if that talent pool can be identified, commonized so nicely for each, whether it's agriculture, whether it's what you're looking for, if we can have that ability to dip in easily and pick out the resources we're looking for, instead of so hard to find a diamond in the, it's so difficult and it's time draining. I tell you, you go through so many interviews, so many disappointments until you get the right match. And as you said, I don't know if it's Fred or Ben earlier, then you try and see if that person can be a cultural fit. And he may be a good guy, but man, oh man, you think this guy can be a cultural fit despite everything going in his. Okay, so that's from me.
So you would still say mainly skills. That's an issue. If that could be improved,
and experiential knowledge.
A much bigger topic. Yeah, and experience.
I think I agree with your point on I mean, you and I suffer from the same problem, right? Which is a small talent pool.
Mm.
And I think if you look at, and both of you use the example of Coca-Cola, and other companies, the succession planning, I wonder if Syngenta, they probably do, the succession planning about moving people around, knowing, 2 years out about who is good, who might consider moving, and so on and so forth. And it allows you to build a bench that sort of solves a lot of these problems. I mean, our bench is tiny. And I think some way of understanding that map better would really help us, I think, and that's on us in a lot of ways to do some better succession planning. I think the other thing that's quite specific that's always concerned me is, one of the missions wherever I've worked has usually been about building on skills and developing them with the local kind of population.
Yes.
That's why you bring in international people. And the prize person you can bring for that is a member of the local, diaspora, right? But the ability to attract diaspora wherever I've worked in Africa is really, really hard. And I don't know if you guys have a solution for it, but I struggle and struggle and struggle. I know Kenya, there are agencies now setting themselves up, but it's an issue for us that I suffer from constantly.
Yeah.
I think what I would add there really, and without repeating, so number one, I think time. Typically, when we look for people, we look for them at the shortest time frames and need them like yesterday. And typically, the reason why that happens is we never count the cost of the negative impact that a mistake could be. So, righting a wrong that has happened when recruiting takes much longer time and could cost the business much more. I would also think, one thing that, Ben and Henry are really good examples, people being able to embrace the idea that they could work in different environments. And I find that very many of our candidates and people we get to talk to in recruitments are not willing to be flexible. They'll quickly judge, why do I want to work in Uganda? Why do I want to work in Khartoum? So that flexibility, and to allow people to understand that when you're flexible and you get wider experience is actually a good thing, as opposed to the risks that people attach to some of these environments. And that will allow people to, be a bit more mobile. So it would cost Ben, cheaper if they're able to get a good resource from Nairobi, if there was one that fits his needs, as opposed to get one from, either the UK or South Africa. So this mindset needs to be improved. But I would also lastly echo what Ben has said about the rigor of succession planning and the importance of each one of us as a leader in organizations to really think, how do we grow the people we have? Because it will always cost much more to hire a new person than to develop the one that you have.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting you say that. I know that Heineken, for instance, is very, very strong also on succession planning. And I'm just thinking, and this is not a question that I had, but what we also see, and I guess you are suffering or part of as well, is that once you do have great candidates and you take them up the ladder and, you're trying to, and then they're snatched from you because you are, the big company that everybody's headhunting from. So it's very difficult to get people all the way to the top in that pyramid because they get snatched out at some way half through. Is that what you experience as well? I see Henry say yes, always. Maybe we're part of that.
So you need planning in place, but I don't know what I see, and which is something I'm trying to, especially the expats from stopping, is you have a succession plan in place. You got ready now, develop 2-3 years, 3 to 5 years, that sort of thing. But it's very, very important for the expats to be able to develop the local successor or whoever's coming up the chain. A lot of them, unfortunately, when you get to not do it. And unfortunately, when they leave, you get back to square one, where you have to find someone to come back and train that local guy, because the local guy is in a 2 to 3 year box, not yet ready, unfortunately. Okay. Right, that I personally, I'm on a mission right now to ensure that performance management, right, we get the succession plan, right, and also for the experts to drive their knowledge, the experience, training down to the successor and the other team members. We want these local guys to be that they can succeed or take over from the experts. Look, we are all I'm an endangered species. I'm an expert in Uganda, but at the end of the day, my job is to drive growth in terms of our business in the East African market. But for me, in order to do that, manpower is my biggest resource, and I need to get people up to that level that they, in my absence, if I leave, can drive this business exactly like what I'm doing, and even better. Okay, now that's the difficult part of the succession planning.
Yeah.
Well said, I think, Henry. I think we've surpassed a bit of the time, of the networking time, but I've really enjoyed this. I don't know if Fred or Ben or Henry want to add anything as a conclusion.
Well, I mean, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I think it underscores the importance of talent. I think we very easily forget that talent is not uniform everywhere, and there's really big opportunities in being able to interact, network, and understand the challenges that we go through in different areas and sectors. So at least using this session, it's been great to learn, what Henry is going through in Uganda, what Ben is going through, and the fact that people is actually the biggest resource that any leader must safeguard to grow their business. So I think it's been a really fruitful session, and I hope the participants have found it as fruitful as well.
Thanks, Fred. I did, at least. I don't know, Ben or Henry, or should we go to the network session?
Very good. Thank you for having us. It's lovely to discuss common problems and solutions. So a really well thought through thing. Thank you.
Oh, happy to hear that. And Henry?
Yes, Inez, and I can see we have commonalities across the board here. The chat will continue even after this, Inez, don't worry.
Yes.
It's key and great. I mean, we all want to lead world class, especially in Africa. So thanks for this. I'm enjoying this.
Perfect. Me too. I see there's no Q&A question, but what we'll do is we'll drop back to the tables, I think, for a little bit. So if anybody does have a question or wants to do a one-on-one, just knock on our doors. To be honest, I think Shai had to drop the call, so he's out. So I'm just going to leave it, I think, over to Kitso, who's going to technically take us back to the tables. So I just wanted to thank everybody for this event, and obviously we'll be in touch. And thanks everybody for joining as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.